just over 18 years of tech recruiting specific experience and a couple years within engineering as well. So I started a firm, Nexus IT Group, in 2010, focused specifically on tech. So we've done that for the last 13 years. Really kind of the last 6 months or so, we are launching a kind of a SaaS solution for individuals, job seekers. So it's a two-sided marketplace. And really the idea of it that when you have calls with recruiters, right, you go through a lot of the same things that, a recruiter will ask, right? And that's kind of like, what's your salary? Are you open to remote? Do you want to go to the office? All these types of questions. And if it doesn't match, right, then you kind of wasted your time with that recruiter, and you probably never hear from that person again, as an example. So kind of what we're building, and that's called Enjoy Mondays, is actually to help mitigate a lot of that like front loading of the recruitment process. So really you fill out a survey, if you will, and basically what happens then, that matches you based on kind of what you define as fulfilling, right, or your perfect job. And so we're excited about it. We have several hundred employers already kind of ready to go on it. We launch in a couple of weeks for that too. So hopefully, the goal of it to have a more pleasurable experience for both parties, right? Because you don't like to just talk to somebody to talk to them, right? If it's not a match, it's not a good match. And you value your time. And same on the, recruiting or HR side, right? They have hundreds, if not thousands of people that they're looking at. They want to talk to people that are closest fit to what they're looking for. And a lot of that is kind of the intrinsic side of that, right? And it's what that position offers. So it's not even the hard skills aspects of the role. So, but yes, I'm excited to kind of jump into, what you've provided here. I'm just going to get this up and running. I guess if you could just maybe help me a little bit here on, as far as just your current situation. I mean, are you actively employed? You just kind of, what does that look like here, I guess, as far as your current situation?
Yeah, so currently I am not employed. I was laid off from my last position in April.
Okay.
And that was more of a structural type of thing. Like I worked at a reinsurance group, RGA. Not sure if you're familiar with them.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So Reinsurance Group of America. So my team was kind of more of I guess like a floating type of team, to put it in one way.
Okay.
Where we would just take on, projects that were, that came across to us from other teams within the evaluation department, and just handle their needs, on a project to project basis. So a couple of months ago, we moved under a new manager who kind of wanted the team to take on a more actuarial focus, and which makes perfect sense. Everyone in our department, other than myself and one other person who was a VP, was an actuary. So, I kind of got lost in the shuffle there a little bit. And, they decided to not renew my contract. So that ended the first week of April. And I've been looking, ever since.
Okay. Yeah. And I saw that as a end date. I just wanted to make sure that was accurate. So, okay. And how has the job search been so far? I mean, are you getting a lot of activity, or has it been frustrating? I guess, what are you kind of feeling?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's been just as frustrating as I remember it being the last time I was looking for a job. That would have been a couple of years ago. I've gotten a little bit of traction. So the layoff kind of coincided with a move. I actually moved across the country. I live in San Diego now, and the job search has kind of been focused on jobs in this area, as well as fully remote and hybrid work. And yeah, I mean, in general, it's been with two exceptions that I've interviewed with. One place that I'm waiting to hear back from any day now, really, and another position that I'm waiting for an interview date from. Other than that, it's been a couple hundred applications so far, with no real traction. So you could say it's been very frustrating.
Sure. And are you using kind of several different platforms for that, or do you kind of stick to just one or two for the search?
No, I've definitely used a bunch of different platforms, LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, a couple of other like IT focused platforms that are like similar to your company, like little
Sure.
startup options that are
Yep.
more IT focused, BI type positions. So I've definitely been, trying a lot of different avenues.
Okay. And so have you had, kind of a lot of conversations, or do you feel like it's more of submitting applications and then it's kind of a black hole, or, just not getting a response from employers?
I would say I have had a handful of conversations with recruiters, some of which have led to my current applications that are still up in the air.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say by and large, it's been shouting into the void
Yeah.
pretty much.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And we'll kind of see if there's, some things that we hopefully can suggest here to take away and kind of fine tune that a little bit. I think that it's also good to note that, the conditions that we're in right now in the market, even our firm, we're kind of seeing a little bit of slowdown, unfortunately. And I know some of the indexes that get released as a industry as a whole, as it relates to hiring, have been kind of ticking down over the last 6 months or so. And so sometimes those are leading indicators for worse things to come. Sometimes, they're not. So I don't want to be doom and gloom by any means, but I think that some of the challenges also may be just because of what's happening. As far as the layoffs that we're seeing in the news, we're not really, at least the client base that we work with, we're not really experiencing that. I think we've had some clients kind of pull the reins back a little bit on hiring and just be a little bit more cautious, but not necessarily like just stopping everything. So from our side, I think our trend until really recently, our rec flow, our openings is what we would call it, are about as plentiful as last year, which last year was a good year. So I'm hoping that it's just kind of some weird things happening right now. Maybe some are slowed down, but we'll kind of see. So I don't know if you probably can't see. I have your resume up here, so let me share my screen. I know you obviously know what it looks like, but it'll be easier probably for you to also follow along with my suggestions. So I took off some of your stuff. Obviously, we'll scrub any kind of personal information too as well, but I definitely didn't want to have your private stuff out there by any means. So I think things that we really kind of identified, maybe we'll kind of jump into that real quick as why people essentially aren't getting interviews. So the first one is a lot of people apply to the wrong role, right? And so it doesn't mean that person couldn't do the role or have a lot of the skills to do the role. The problem is, as a recruiter, right, if you're getting anywhere from 50 to 100 to 400 applications, a lot of times the first thing you look at is, okay, in their current position, are they doing what we're looking for, right? And generally that's by title. And we'll kind of jump into your resume a little bit because I know you've held a few different titles over the last couple years, and so we kind of talk about like what you may be targeting to see if we can help there. But so that's a big part of people aren't even getting a fair look just because of purely the title doesn't match. And so as a recruiter, if you have let's just say 300 of applications to go through, one of the easiest ways to quickly rule somebody out is if their title is not really even close to what they're hiring for. So I know that makes sense, but that's kind of from a recruiter's perspective. Apply to anything and everything, kind of approach. A lot of times people get frustrated or candidates get frustrated, but so we like to have a little bit more of a targeted approach, and we'll kind of get into that. So as we mentioned in this first one is really around, career accomplishments. So you have a career summary. I think that's definitely what we're hitting on. I would recommend probably to call it more of accomplishments. It's more when you lay those out, they're very meaningful. So a lot of the things you put here, so like in kind of a career summary, again, that's a summary of what you're doing. I really like to jump into and recommend name career accomplishments, right? Since you're a technical nature, I think technical skills is a good spot to have that. I would actually recommend to put education closer to the bottom, especially since it's not a technical degree, and it seems like the roles that you've had are more technical in nature. I don't know if you're familiar with kind of the term above the fold, right? When it comes to web development. So everything you you see like on that first page before you have to scroll down, you really want that to be the applicable items, because you're only going to get 7 to 30 seconds that somebody's going to spend on your resume before they decide to say, yeah, let's interview, or pass it on to the hiring manager for review, or to just, decline. So changing this to accomplishments, I think, is going to be really impactful for you. And really what you want to see is that needs to be bullet pointed. So you need to have, and these are something obviously that you would work through and think about, but whatever those big ticket items are that you can reflect on, really probably going back to this role, as a data science and this role. So we're looking at the last, 2 years. When you think about what you and your group, right, that you were part of did, that was a big initiative for the organization, that should really be bullet pointed here and highlighted. Stay away from soft skills there, right? We want very factual hard skills. So when you're in sales or something like that, those are much easier to put there, because it's, I grew, something X%, or added X amount of revenue. So sometimes in the technical field, it's a little bit harder. But if you think about, things that kind of this Tableau development is maybe something that you could talk about. But why was that, impactful for the team? So really just kind of build that out a little bit, or that story, and that should be a bullet point for you. All this, all these technical items here, they belong, and obviously you probably have those there. It looks like there's a lot of them in there under the technical aspects of it. And then really kind of the currently seeking opportunity. The problem with this is they teach this a lot on resume writing, unfortunately, especially in academia. The problem is that it's too loose. So professional growth, what does that mean, right? Career advancement, what does that mean? So for you, Scott, that means something different than what it means for me, right? And it means something for each person. So unless you specifically outline exactly what that means, it's kind of, unfortunately, it just takes up space. That, to me, this is very valuable space to use. I really like, again, 3 to 5 bullet point of very strong, spearheaded, grew, implemented, delivered, right? Whatever those action items are, those go there. So I would clean that up just as a recommendation. I will say, as a individual in the tech space, I'm going to expect you to know Microsoft Office. So I think you got to take that out. That's never going to be a screening tool. And I think it loses a lot of these other tools that you have, kind of get lost. So I would really take those out. Can we talk about these other skills real quick? Are those things that you're going after, or are those things that you've picked up? Because I'm assuming a lot of those you wouldn't really use as much in kind of the data role that you kind of described that you're going after. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think those are more general type skills. So for instance, I have Scrum in there because the last 2 positions I've had have operated under agile methodologies, and we work in sprints. So that's really not I didn't think of it as a hard skill. It's just sort of a methodology that I kind of worked under. So
okay, so I'm going to recommend taking those out, and we'll kind of talk about where some of those may be more applicable to work into your resume. Because as an example, Scrum and Agile, those are excellent keywords for as a recruiter, right? If I'm writing a Boolean and I need a data person that has experience with Agile, and or Scrum, right, is usually how I would write it. I want to be able to hit that so you don't get lost, especially on a LinkedIn search or, Indeed search if you have your resume on there. But I think putting them in the right place and then massaging them into the resume is where we'll get to here, and will be more beneficial. So I'm going to take these, I'm not going to take them out yet, but I'm going to just pull them down. One of the big things, so there's a lot going on here. I almost want to recommend I don't want to go through and pull out all the print or the commas there, but what I would recommend is doing almost probably 3 columns with bullet points. So I'd have to go through and obviously do, each one here, but I think you probably know where I'm going with that. So let's stop there. So yeah, just create those in a column, probably 3 with as many as you have, right? And that will fill that out. The reason I say that is it gives a little bit of spacing there. It's a little bit more aesthetically easier for me to tell exactly what the skill sets are versus kind of just getting jumbled up. The other thing I would say is if you're not really comfortable in these, so if it's just exposure, but you're not really able to like talk to those from a job perspective, I wouldn't put them on there. Where you can put them is when we get into kind of the work experience, you could have a section that would basically be like environment, or sometimes people will say like tools used. But the environment, this is where we get into that like, Scrum piece, right? And so let's say like Alteryx was something that you had to like utilize, but like if somebody tried to go there in a interview around Alteryx and you're like, gosh, I can't speak that in depth about it, that's probably a better place for there, because it's still going to hit the keywords portion of it. But like if I'm not hiring you for your Alteryx knowledge, then it really shouldn't be in your top tech skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever, like SAP, I'm assuming you probably worked with SAP to do your job, but you may not be like an SAP person, right? And working on all the modules. And so what happens is if I see SAP, I'm like, okay, well, Scott is really knowledgeable in SAP. I'm going to ask him what modules he's worked with. Is he doing implementations on them? And you're like, whoa. I only had SAP to pull data to do my job, right? Whatever it is. So really kind of those core skills that you're like, man, I could talk about these, no problem. I'm very strong at them, at least a 7 out of 10, if not an 8 as far as the tool. That's really what should go here. All the other ones should really go. So we like to just do kind of like a bold here. You could even do some, I guess, italics if you wanted to break that up a little bit, how that looks. But that's kind of the route I would go with. So we'll leave that alone. We kind of already put in the agile Scrum piece. If there's anything in there that you felt like is applicable to this role, right, you would do that for each role, right? So if the I can't remember the name, let's just say the SEO work was more like down here somewhere, then that would be more of the environment, right? And probably more the SEO tools that you were using than just like SEO. So like Google Ads, FIFO, Simra, whatever, it may be. So here's where I think a lot of people miss an opportunity. So we'll kind of jump back into this section, and that is right here. So you can see an example of what we kind of tried to build out on your resume, right? The career accomplishments, jumped into professional experience. We love a description of what that company does. Okay, so in this case, right, I did Enjoy Mondays as an example. So in this case, I know I kind of took it off, but like, let's just say you work at Enjoy Mondays, right? So you would do 2 to 4 sentences description at a very high level of what that, not what you did for the company, but what that company does, right? So, maybe it's a publicly traded commodities trading firm doing X, Y, Z, yada, yada. Because these are all kind of keywords that will help when people are doing Boolean searches, specifically HR and recruiters. It'll help pull in because a lot of people are searching for industries, but it also will help if somebody's not as familiar with that organization. It'll also help kind of connect the dots on like, okay, that's exactly the industry that we're in. Scott has that experience. So, and as a recruiter, I'm not going to go Google every single person's company that they're currently working at, right? We just don't have time for that. So make it as easy as possible, right, to tell the story of what you're doing. So we really like, again, kind of that style here. And I'll send you this document as a follow-up so you have it. But really kind of italicize that. It makes it easier for the reader. And then you kind of jump right into your job title and, obviously kind of how long you've been there. So then we'll jump into that next section of the resume. I mentioned this already, kind of a company summary. Really, you want to list the accomplishments that you did under that. So you can kind of look at it 2 different ways with kind of your background. So you would have, whatever Enjoy Mondays does, then we put a little space in there. You're a business architect, for them. We'd actually probably, you can keep, that one's kind of up to you. I like to keep it on with the company level line. Some people move it. Well, let me back up. If you had multiple job titles within the organization, what we like to do is actually put how long you were with the company in this space, right? So let's say you started in 2018. So we say June 2018 to April 2023, and then under each job, right, you would put the actual time frame that you had it, and then your bullet points under it. Kind of shows career progression, and it helps the reader understand kind of what you've done in your career. A lot of times, unfortunately, people will put like these dates under each job title that they have within the company, and so it looks like they're jumping around when really they had pretty good tenure with an organization. So for the business architect, really this is your opportunity. So I think what you put here is definitely really good. If this built to optimize Alteryx workflows is completely different, I think that needs to be a different bullet point. Right. So very like clear, concise, like, I did this, I did this, I did this, instead of jumbling it all together. So I would, if you can think of like maybe a few more, I know you don't want to overdo it. You're only there, less quite just, shy of a year. So you don't want to build out 10 things because it's like, did you really do all that in 10 months? But whatever those key things that you were responsible for that you delivered or were in the process of delivering, right? Maybe, the role ended before you were able to deliver it, put those there. I would rather have less than more, right? So kind of stay away. A lot of people put like soft skills. I don't love those there because soft skills are so subjective. You think that you're really good at soft skills, but then I interview you and it's like, okay, that's not even close to what we're looking for, right? So I kind of just stay away from it. As you get into more leadership type roles, architect roles, like really good communication, thorough communication are to be expected, but it's really hard to like quantify that. So leave this space for really actionable, good keywords that'll help you get found, right, on the job boards, LinkedIn, etc. And then again, sometimes people will put a career kind of or accomplishment section similar to like this environment. So they may put, and then they'll put some more kind of basically bullet point, right? And they'll do blah 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 blah, whatever those are. I think at the stage that you're at in your career, these aren't necessary. Generally more technical, kind of in the weeds type of skill sets, you won't see the accomplishments. It's more kind of executive leadership focused where maybe help deliver X amount of production by X percentage, eliminated waste, hired X amount of people, whatever the case may be. Sometimes we'll see that here. But I think building out, just an overall accomplishment section over the last 2 years of your career will satisfy that. So for now, for your case, I probably would recommend taking that out, but definitely would build out kind of that environment, right? And this is your opportunity to hit on, you don't need to put necessarily like the business analyst piece of it because people understand like with Agile and Scrum, like what that is, right? So daily stand-ups, all those kind of things, you don't need to put that there. Now, I would put kind of the tech stack. So like if you guys are using, Jira for part of your Scrum meetings, if you're using, Confluence, I'm trying to remember all the tools, sorry, off the top of my head, the Atlassian product line, if you're using, MS Project, whatever it is, right? I'm not saying you are an expert at these, and I'm not going to quiz you on them, but this gives me an understanding of, okay, these were the tools that you were using to do your job. So build that out, keep just one space in between there. And then, so I would go through and do that with this role as well. So this is where some people may agree or disagree. You can use this for what it's worth. So because you already have a few years of experience under your belt, and since the degree is not a data science degree, cybersecurity, computer science degree, right, more technical in nature, I would probably float this down to the bottom. Again, you can kind of, this one gets a little subjective, so kind of do what you want with it. But I would any boot camps are real sticky situation in the market. Unfortunately, some of the boot camps oversell them to students and really make it sound like you're guaranteed to get a job after the boot camp. Obviously, looks like you were able to kind of maneuver, which is awesome. I think it's a great story. But a lot of times, students and I guess people coming out after completing those will compare those to like a 4-year degree, and it's not the same thing. Or they'll compare it to actual like hands-on work experience. And I understand they may train you as that, but it's still not the same. So I think it's misleading to put it under your professional experience. I feel pretty strongly that it goes under education.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, and it's a very common thing that we see, and so I'm passionate about that. But so I like, sometimes if you have different education, sometimes you can just do, and in your situation, right, you can do training, right? And so if you have certifications, some people will maybe not put the training, they'll put certifications. Kind of depends on each person's situation. So if you get your Scrum Master down the road, or PMP or Tableau, they have a number of different certifications. That's where I would build out your next bullet pointed list of those. I'm assuming this probably came over formatting wonky, but if you did put those in, I definitely would take those out. But I think it's probably a formatting issue for some reason. When I think I put it into Google Docs, it probably did that, or it's trying to say like there's a weird spacing. So
You mean the underline?
yeah, the underline. I don't think you.
Yeah, I didn't put those in.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah. It just kind of caught me off guard when it didn't underline here. I wasn't quite sure. So, but yeah. So for me, I think this, like, we started to build out a really good looking resume. A lot of it will have to do with the web copy, right? The content that you put in there, and only like that. Sometimes if you look at kind of the job description that you were hired for, they'll have like very like actionable items in there that they want this person like to do. Those are always kind of good places or cheats to kind of look at, like, okay, how would I describe, my, 3 to 5 bullet points under each job. So if you're struggling to kind of come up with content for that, that can be something good to revisit for that.
Sure.
I do like your LinkedIn profile here. I like all this. Obviously location. You don't have to put your address, city, state, and zips. Good enough, especially coming into an ATS. That's all we need to be able to kind of search for you. If you're comfortable putting your address, like, no worries. Most people just put city, state, and zip for that. And then the last thing. So was this truly is this volunteer experience that you were doing during school? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Again, I think at this point in your career, that should probably go away. If this,
Yeah, I think that was probably a relic from the last consultation I had, which was through the school's career center.
Yep.
So that might just be a little bit of advertising that they wanted me to do for them.
Yep.
So yeah, I do agree.
Yep. I think if you the current, your last employer, right? If they say, hey, we want to put you through this leadership training, right? So like Enterprise, right? They're known for having like a really good like management training program, right? If you complete that, then I think you could throw that under this education and certifications area, right? Whatever that leadership training program is called. But volunteer and all that stuff, it only takes up space in a LinkedIn profile. Resume. Don't worry about trying to keep it at one page. I think that's where we're at. I think once you add some content, it'll jump down to the second page, and there's nothing wrong with that. So don't stress out about trying to keep it under one page. If somebody's told you that, your first job, sure, probably is going to be one page, but anything after that, 2 pages is good.
Okay, yeah, that's been kind of hammered into me, so I've always kept the formatting with that in mind.
Yep.
That it should be 1 page, but
yeah, we're first job out of college or school. Yes, absolutely. Anything really after that, again, content is king. And so if you're really building out, again, you want really like concise, actionable items. That's more important than keeping it at 1 page. So, yep. And then we took out kind of some of the fluff. So I know it's not completely formatted. We got to take all this stuff out, and add in here. Obviously, we wouldn't want this spacing. We'd want them, butted up against each other. But I think it's starting to look pretty good, just from a aesthetically aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I know with the 3-column bullet points, there was an earlier version of my resume, maybe 2 to 3 years ago, where I did have the skills listed like that at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remembered it was always a hassle trying to get it to work well in PDF form. Like it would always be shifted over, and it just really wouldn't look good. So
Okay.
I know you're doing it here in Google Docs. Is that usually is that what you would recommend? Is like import it into Google Docs and then do it from there, or?
Yeah. So a couple reasons. I like Google Docs because I always recommend every year, even if you're happy where you're at, for people to go through and just update their resume. If there's anything big they did that year, to just put it on there. And Google Docs is a very easy, way to keep a running kind of live doc, right, of your resume. We can let's do a quick save and see. It should pull up. I generally don't have a lot of issues. Yeah. So, I think it pulls up pretty clean for me. So yes, I think you should be good doing that in the Google Docs. It shouldn't, have bad formatting for you. So yeah, so obviously once it's all completed, it generally speaking, it would look, something like this, obviously a little bit cleaner, and this would be built out into more of a 2 to 3 sentences. If you get stuck, don't be afraid. I don't know what your take on AI is, but whether it's ChatGPT or Google Bard or whatever the case may be, those are really good places to get this information, right? And so it could just be, write me a 3 to 4 sentence overview of XYZ company, right? And it usually does a pretty good job of that. If you feel like you're stuck. We really probably covered most of that on kind of these sections without actually going back to this document and talking about it. I think the last one, do you want to spend just a few minutes on your LinkedIn profile, or what's kind of your preference there?
Yeah, let's do that. I just had just one general question.
Yeah.
So how would I basically structure the resume so that the accomplishments in that little summary, I'm not just restating later on for each job?
Here. Yep.
Yeah.
So the accomplishments should really be, so it'd be nice if you had one from here, right? So this role, and then if you had maybe 1 to 2 here. And I think probably what you're saying is the 1 to 2, these 2 would also be accomplishments that I would put here, right? Is probably what I'm hearing. My recommendation is just list it twice, just find a different way to rewrite it. If you have, let's just take this. So let's just say use this one right here. Okay. I use a lot of paid tools for AI writing, but you could easily do this as a prompt, right? For some of them. So I may just say, hey, change tone, change length, summarize, rephrase, whatever you want to, utilize. I'll just say maybe improve writing. And what it's doing is it's basically saying the same thing, just in a different way. Now, led the global, that may be a little aggressive compared to what I see here, right? But you could easily kind of take these ideas and change that, right? You're basically saying the same thing, you're just saying it in a different way.
Okay, so what percentage of focus would you say that recruiters look at the overall summary compared to these bullet points that we'd be rephrasing?
So they're probably going to look more at this. The things that are going to be hit here are really going to be the keyword things. So where I think you can get a little bit more specific is in if there's certain industries that you were working that it's in, where that really helps is if you work in an agency or consulting firm where it's a massive consulting firm, but then they work in so many different industries or clients, right? Then in this section, you can get more specific into, supported a large banking client doing a Tableau development, lasted 9 months, worked with 20 individuals, 30 overseas, whatever the case may be. And so you can kind of start to break that out. So I think where you have this, This just gives you an opportunity to get a little bit more like into the weeds. So maybe you talk about like the size of your team, or kind of more specific of like what is spearhead, like what role was that, right? What were the deliverables of it? If you were evaluating different technologies, you can kind of talk a little bit about that, right? Looked at current state versus future state. Again, I'm just kind of trying to think just off the cuff there of what some of the things you might have been doing, but yeah, and I think just again, kind of looking at the job description that you were hired for will spark some of those ideas where you're like, yes, I absolutely did that, I did that, and I did that. Those are a lot of times good to put in there in that area. So that way, most people, in each job only have a few, and that's if you've even been there a while, that are like really what we consider big accomplishments, right? So this section, as you build out your career, you really want to focus on what are the big ones, right? So your big ones 5 years from now may not be anything to do with these two roles. They may, right? But there's a good chance that you've done bigger and better things, and that are more maybe applicable to your next role, that now those are here, right? And you just leave kind of your existing content that you had from your kind of live working doc of the resume that you keep up. So just use kind of again, there's so many AI tools, and I don't know if you play around with it, but just prompt improve this content, rewrite this, repurpose this content for a resume, right? You can give very specific directions, and it'll give you just examples on what to do. I mean, there's even I think it's called Quillbot, QUILBOT, I think it is, that you can use, and there's a certain amount of characters that are free. So, this amount of characters would be free for sure. And you can basically say shorten, summarize, expand, right? So they're just rewriting basically the same thing you're saying if you're using it up here and you want to use it down here. So did that answer your question on that?
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much covered it.
Okay. But I do think if you have that accomplishment, right, and your career accomplishments, you also want to know where that was at in the work history. Because if I see you did something really amazing, but then I don't see you talk about it in kind of the job, then I'm like, okay, well, where did you do that, right? And so by listing it, it just helps kind of connect the dots as a reader of your resume, especially when I'm on the phone with you and we're doing an interview. That's when I really get in depth into your resume. Initially, we're just trying to get past the screening tools, the AI tools, right, that are matching keywords, all those things.
Yeah, so it flows from the general to the specific, just like it would on a screening call.
Yep. Okay, so because I don't know and maybe don't understand, what are you qualified for? And what is that next job for you? Is it a business architect? Is it data? Because I know you mentioned kind of in your summary, initially looking for data analysts. To me, there's a pretty we hire business architects at 180,000, right? And so I don't know if business architect is probably the right title to go after. So I'd love to kind of hear just what you think and what you're wanting to target there.
Yeah, so I mean, I was basically looking at BI positions, business analyst, a lot of dashboard building. I put business architect because that was my job title at my last position. Wasn't quite making 180, but that was my position. But yeah, I would say the common thread of my past 3 jobs, which goes back to 2019, is that requirement gathering and kind of building out solutions, usually in the form of dashboards and visualizations, but also a lot of data wrangling and transformation, ETL type stuff. And then that's taken the form of 3 very different job titles. So there's been a little bit of ambiguity from my end on exactly what to pursue, but just something in that general area is what I've settled on.
Okay, but what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? Like 2 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could see myself like definitely, building out visualizations and taking on like, like those bigger projects to kind of, centralize reporting and, work on data transformation skills a bit more. So just kind of like integrating what I've learned at those past few positions.
Okay. And so what was the title you said? With business data analyst?
Data analyst, like if you want me to like give you one or two,
Yeah.
I would say like business analyst or business architect.
Okay. So I'll give you from my like previous life. Like I think a business architect is going to be a lot of like where you'll get skipped over from my perspective, right? And take it with a grain of salt, but just from being in the tech space for as long as I have, I would be a little bit concerned if like that's an inflated title based on, kind of what I see on the resume from an experience standpoint. I think it's awesome you have the title, right? They gave it to you and that's what they use. But a lot of times, as a business architect, like, I mean, a lot of those individuals are 12 plus years into their career, right? And they're all focused on strategy. And everything you've described to me seems a little bit more hands-on potentially. So just something to think about is you don't want to, mislead the market when you're out looking for opportunities, because two things, if somebody the challenge is that you're going to get a bunch of emails or spam because they're just doing a business architect job title search. And then you like, yeah, I'm interested. Let's talk. Right. And then they actually look at your profile, because unfortunately that's what happens in our industry, right? It's a numbers game. So if I'm like, okay, I want everybody on LinkedIn that is a current business architect job title, I'm going to send 2,000 messages to those people, right? And give them a little bit of like, here's a bit who's about. And you're like, oh yeah, right, I'm actively looking for new opportunities. I was a business architect. This looks awesome, right? You reply back to that recruiter and they're like, oh yeah, sweet, Scott replied. And then they look, right, and it's like, okay, maybe not quite qualified. I feel like maybe you also could be experiencing some of that or will experience some of that. And so I think it's always good you're still going to get those because that's your past title and it's going to pull up. But I do think that better ways that will help you get found a little bit better, but also help other people looking at your profile really narrow down to what you're looking for. So let's jump into it. So the very first thing that I always recommend is, so this space in your LinkedIn profile is so important. And so what is recommended is the headline section, which would be right here, what you use right here. So I think that's great. But when I look at one of these profiles on a LinkedIn, right, search, I want to know exactly what Scott's doing and if I'm going to message him fairly quickly. So it's good that you pulled up in my Boolean search, right? That's half the battle. But then do I need to open your profile? Do I need to read through it? I would say with this, I would have to open up your profile and look through it. Okay. Which I don't necessarily want to do as a recruiter because, again, right, it's a numbers game. So I'm trying to get in front of as many business architects of the world as I can in one day, right? Is generally the thought process of a recruiter. Now, if they're a good recruiter, that's not their thought process, but unfortunately for the most of the recruiting entities, that's the thought process. So I would recommend, I know I say your most recent job title here. I think you should put the job title that you want, okay? So if that's business analyst, right? Maybe it's business analyst or / data analyst, right? However you want to look at that. I think the biggest thing is really honing in. Like if you want to be a BI developer, BI analyst, like that's what you need to put. If you want to be on the business side of it, leading Scrum and some of those things, then that's really what you need to target. If you want to be a business systems analyst, which is a little bit more into the weeds generally than a BA, that's what you need to target. I'll let you kind of do some soul searching on what that looks like for you. But that's what I would recommend here. And then again, once you've done that, just list again, kind of a slash, and then the industries that you've been in, right? So is this, do they do any specific type of insurance, or is it's just reinsurance, right? Is it property casualty or?
It's life reinsurance.
Okay. So I think that I would put life reinsurance, right? And then I would put and telecommunications. Is that what that would be considered under probably? Or is
Yeah.
it? Okay. So and telecommunications, and then Anheuser-Busch, would that be CPG, like consumer, I guess, packaged goods, or do you know how they?
Yes, it was in their solutions department. So I mean, obviously, I wasn't like working like in the brewery or anything, but it was just all in the like IT type stuff.
Yeah. But so, and where I'm going with that is like the industry's experience is like, I understand like how this industry works is why you are listing that, because if I can find like you as a data analyst and you have some exposure, say to TCOM, and that's what I'm looking for, like that's a big win for me as a recruiter because
Mhm.
you can talk a little bit, right, about the industry. Hopefully you learn about the industry over in a year's period, right? But then also you have the technical skills for it. So that's why, putting that industry in our opinion is so important, is that it helps, connect the dots even better for people that are looking for your profile. Sometimes industries don't matter, right? And people are willing to train and it's only based on skill set, and that's fine. You're going to get those opportunities. But if you have, in my opinion, right, you have life reinsurance, you have telecommunications, and you have, I guess it's CPG. You'd have to think about how Anheuser would actually classify their industry. Let's see. Sometimes they'll put it. Food and beverage is probably how you should put it then. That's kind of how they classify that. And so that is what I would recommend then putting there for that. So looks like you're connected. One of my coworkers, Emily, she just got married this last weekend actually, so she's on a cruise. But oh yeah, that's Anheuser. Sorry. So those should be 3 industries that you have listed in kind of your headline, right? So whether it's, again, whatever that title you land on, and maybe there's 2, right, that are similar. Don't go wild, right? Like don't go Python developer and data analyst, or you need to kind of stay in one lane or the other, but whatever that is, and then list out your industry there. So I think that would be very beneficial for you. I'm a big fan for the about. I think you need to take whatever you put for your career accomplishments here and tech skills, that needs to go right in the about summary section. And then really, you're basically just copying it. At this point, you're really just kind of copying what you came up with, right? So whatever this is, and then I would take the environment piece of it and just smack that right in there. So they're going to.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had going on. If you see the skills at the bottom there.
Yep. Yeah. So you don't have to change. You can keep skills. That's good. Environment just kind of can talk a little bit more of like the agile side of it, or Scrum or waterfall, or can be a little bit more broad, where skills to me is like very specific, like technical skills. But again, keep soft skills out of there. Keep it very like quantifiable, right? So if you have Jura, I can say, hey, Scott, can you tell me about your Jura experience and how you were using it at, reinsurance group, right? And you can speak to that.
Sure.
Okay. It's like reasoning skills. It's pretty hard for you to like speak to that and for me to quantify what you're saying and measure you against other, individuals, right?
So that was auto-filled actually.
Oh, it was. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Where it's just like, where did you use this skill? And then I just it was like a drop down of all the companies I worked at, and I just
Gotcha.
put that for everything. So
okay. Yep. And then that it doesn't matter. It's LinkedIn. It doesn't matter at that point. I wouldn't put it on a resume, but if you want to keep it there, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't probably help you either. Good. That's good. Yep. So that's what I would do. Good professional picture. So I think that's good. So you are in San Diego, correct?
yes.
Okay. Are you open to new opportunities on LinkedIn?
I don't have the banner.
Okay.
Is that what you mean? Like
Yeah,
the little,
I'll tell you right now, actually.
yeah, I don't think I have it on.
Okay. Any reason?
I just don't think I remembered to turn it on after I was laid off, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, you're good. So you do pull up as open to work. So this will say the types of roles, right, that you're open to, locations, all that stuff. So full-time contract. Okay. So that's good. Okay. And then do you feel pretty comfortable with just kind of the job search and kind of your approach? I'm assuming are you looking at a lot of remote jobs and how to go about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I have like a search alerts on.
Okay.
Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, just to try to make sure that you're also looking at stuff outside of San Diego. Yeah.
Oh yeah, as far as remote goes, yeah. I'm not limiting myself. I know that like a lot of positions have, Pacific time zone preferred, but they're based in Portland.
Right.
I don't let that limit me.
Yep. Okay. This is the only other thing I was going to say is you could probably pull this out if you want. I don't know if I see the benefit of having it there. If I could see if you were like working, like if you were something like this, like working, oh my gosh, sorry, caps is on, right? Like in or out, I guess, something like that. So
Mhm.
that way, if you're like applying to jobs in St. Louis and it shows like, hey, I have a connection to that area, and you're kind of same here. Otherwise, I don't know if I see. I mean, I guess you could put if you did do it, I would keep the company and I would just do comma like that and lose the parentheses. It just looks a little bit cleaner, but I still not 100% sure. I'd understand like why you feel like you would put it or need to put it. So
No. I'm saying that. I mean, that makes sense.
yeah, I'm just trying to keep it a little bit cleaner looking. Like there's nothing that unless you're willing to move back to St. Louis, I would recommend putting that in there, like that connection to the area. So like as a recruiter, but if that's not really something you're seeking right now, I would probably just take those out. So. Any questions about anything that we talked about? I think that was really kind of the big things that I wanted to cover and hopefully help you out there.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of valuable stuff in there. Would you be able to send me a copy of everything, like the Google Doc we just worked on, and then this
Yeah,
one as well?
yeah. No, I can do that. Those two and send that as a follow up. And then yeah, if you have any questions, I mean, feel free to reach out. You have my email, and even if you get it updated, happy to take another look at it for you.
Sure. Yeah, I would appreciate that. What does the timeline look like for you guys? You said you were going to launch in a few weeks.
Yeah, yep. So we are really actually on Friday was supposed to be our launch date. So we just have a few things in beta that were a little bit of snags and testing. So finishing that up, we have the dev site, all that's done. I would say we probably won't launch, even if it's all ready to go by Friday with just kind of the holiday weekend. I don't love that. So we probably wait till that next weekend before we do that. So that would be July, was that 11th? I don't have a calendar right in front of me, sorry. But yeah, I think it'd probably be right around that time.
Okay.
So yeah,
So is there like
second week in July. Go ahead.
okay, is there like a priority access for if we signed up earlier?
No, it's really just we're obviously doing some of these assessments for individuals to help out before we get too crazy. But it's really so it's not about priority per se. It's really just about like again, it's taking like, and that's why I asked some of the questions. But like for Scott, like what does meaningful work look like, right? What's fulfilling work look like? And that's why I asked like what job titles do you want to go after, and so there's obviously a number of different things that we've talked about that our system covers. And so if you don't have it, you don't have it, but at least you know that and you're not wasting your time with like opportunities that are going to go nowhere, right? So let's say we have a business analyst role that's in there, right? And one of the things that they, as the employer, they list is this person must have industry knowledge in reassurance. Okay. That's going to, assuming that salary and all the other things are a match, like you're going to match with that role where other people, they may have everything else, but they don't have that industry experience. And that's a must have for this client or employer. There may be only a few people that match just because of that piece. So like we go pretty deep in the system. And again, it's because as an employer, like I know what I can train on and I know what I can't train on. I know what I want. I need this person to have coming in the door and what they don't need to have. And so we essentially are cutting through all the clutter and saying, okay, employer, what are the absolute things that like you will pass on candidates for, right? And let's build that out. as a candidate, right, your wants and needs are different than employers. So what are the like absolute must-haves that you have, right? And a lot of those are the kind of likes and dislikes, like so size of company, remote versus going on site, obviously compensation, right? What you're seeking is a lot of times a deal breaker for job seekers. We even have an industry section, right? If there's a certain industry that you want to work in, right, you can list that. And so we break that down, government clearance, all these things. And so again, the vicious cycles of talking with HR and recruiters just to find out like, oh, you don't have this. Okay, never mind, right? You're not going to be a good fit. We're eliminate all those things. So yeah, there's really no like preferred or somebody gets extra pushed up versus the other. It's all about like whatever that match looks like for you and for the employer. Once that match is made, then it should be a pretty good fit and it should be a really good conversation, because then from an employer perspective, they're going to screen you technically, right? Can you do the job based on what you say, right, on your resume? And then culturally, right? Can I work with you every day? Like, right, do you seem like the type of person I would want to be around from a work perspective? If those two things are not a match, then it's not a match, right? You just aren't capable of doing the job, or maybe don't really fit with the culture of the organization, right? And that's really hard to define. That's more of an EQ thing, right? A feel that you get. But all the other things, right? Like we don't need to talk about it. Like if you're worried about like, okay, I've been matched, like, well, what's the compensation? We already know that's a match, right? Mm-hmm. We already know the type of work that you're open to. We already know that that's a match. So all these like hard skills that are required or that the person, both sides of the party want, those things are already taken care of. So yeah, hopefully when we release, I'd love to be able to get you an opportunity on there. Obviously we're new, we're still kind of gaining traction on it. So for us to get the name out there is going to take, several months before it becomes hopefully mainstream, but I do think it will change how people, find jobs. So yeah. Okay. But well, yeah, hopefully this was very helpful, and you appreciate you taking the time to chat. I know we went probably a little bit longer than scheduled, but yeah, send me a updated copy. I'll send you these documents, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good, Travis. Thanks so much.
Have a good day. Thank you.